Ok. Bienvenidos una vez más. Vamos a empezar. Puedo hablar en español y necesito practicar, pero voy a hablar en inglés. But you can speak in Spanish if you need to. Valentina is going to help me translate because we're going to have some lecture, some discussion, and we'll work together on doing that. So first of all, I'm going to be talking for a few minutes. And again, I'm Kathy Halvorson, and Jesse Knowlton and I, with Valentina's help, are going to be talking this morning about interdisciplinary versus transdisciplinary teamwork, what it is, why we do it, what the challenges are, and in a little while we're going to make you work. So we're going to put you in small groups and give you questions to talk about and answer. But first of all, we're going to start out with a little bit of background. Right, so, and part of what I'm doing, you'll see, we're trying to get this on film, and so this is part of why we're kind of standing in particular ways and mic'd up. So definition of interdisciplinary research. When we have teams of 2 out of 3 of these categories, so social sciences defined very broadly, all kinds of social sciences, economics, political science, geography, anthropology, and or natural sciences, right? So ecology, hydrology, ornithology, entomology, all kinds of natural science, biology. And you represent these different areas, and or engineering sciences, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, etc. When you have a group where you have 2 of those sets of scientists working together, so social and natural, engineering and natural, or all 3 of them working together, that's what we call an interdisciplinary team. So usually if you have just social scientists working together, that may be interdisciplinary, but not what we mean here. So we mean across those big categories. Now, transdisciplinary research groups are groups that include scientists who are interdisciplinary, so social and or natural and or engineering scientists, plus people who probably are not scientists. So we have some people from government here, policymakers. Some of you come from non-governmental organizations like Conservation International. Some of you come from the industry business sector and business associations. So that when we have a team with all those people, sometimes we have landowners, sometimes we have community members. That becomes a transdisciplinary team. So I want to talk with you a little bit about why do that? Why make your life so hard that you try to do this? And this is something I do a lot. And what are the difficulties? And you're going to help to kind of talk about some of those. How do you overcome them? So to give you a little bit of my background and also Jesse's, I have done a lot of work in interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary teams. I currently lead an IAI CRN3 grant. I have a lot of US National Science Foundation funding in the area of sustainability. I lead a big partnerships in international research and education project that is funded by the National Science Foundation, NSF PIRE, that includes Uruguay, Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, los Estados Unidos, and Canada. All right, so 6 countries working together, over 100 scientists and students and people from non-governmental organizations, government. And we're looking at forest-related bioenergy. So I lead that team across very interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary and international work, and have worked in all these areas in interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, international teams. Big teams of scientists with a lot of funding. Jesse and I have taught a number of classes on interdisciplinary science teamwork skills, on transdisciplinary teamwork skills. And we've also published on it. I'm a social scientist. I am a policy scientist. I study environmental natural resource policy issues. And Jessie is a natural scientist. She's a conservation biologist. We also work a lot with Valentine, who is an agronomist or sustainable agriculture specialist. And Tatiana Souza is on our team as well. So she works and is with Conservation International and is on our project looking at forest-related bioenergy. So we have a lot of experience working in this and working on the challenges, but we're also going to all be learning from each other, because we are not experts on what the industry or business sector wants when they work in transdisciplinary teams and how to do that. We're not experts on how government work officials, when they're on teams, what they want, or NGOs. So you're going to help us with that. So first, a question. Why do interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary research? This is a question for you. And Valentina, if someone speaks in Spanish especially, is going to help with translation. So why are we here? Why do we want to do this? What do you think?
Well, we want to make a difference.
Okay, so we want to make a difference. That is a really great goal. What do you mean by that? Why would this help us make a difference?
We want to improve the conditions in the world for the ecosystem and for human populations to flourish.
All right, so, and I'll partly repeat this so we can get it on the audio. So we want to improve conditions in the world so that ecosystems and humans can flourish.
Bueno, creo que el mundo cada vez es más complejo, conflictivo, heterogéneo y dinámico, y automáticamente requiere una visión más holística e integral. Es decir, las preguntas de investigación creo que cambiaron un poco y exigen un trabajo conjunto de muchas disciplinas. Es decir, ya la incertidumbre ahora es mucho mayor. Antes se hacía una hipótesis de cierta certidumbre y bueno, resultó que no es tan cierta.
All right, so we have questions that are very complicated. We're trying to solve global change questions, environmental questions. They have many pieces, many dynamics, many components. And we need people who represent all those components to be in the team. Is that?
And there's more uncertainty also, you mentioned, on the problems, so we need a holistic approach.
So there's uncertainty, there are things we don't know. We need to bring the people together to get the big full picture and reduce that uncertainty as much as possible. Good, okay?
La velocidad de los cambios, como decía Alex, requiere hoy día de respuestas más asertivas, que las comunidades puedan apropiarse o adoptar esas respuestas para enfrentar los cambios. Por lo tanto, la inclusión de los diferentes mundos, tanto de los tomadores de decisión como los científicos, pero también, sobre todo, las comunidades, es central. Por lo tanto, la aproximación que ustedes proponen me parece muy interesante.
Okay, I'll let you go.
Application of knowledge by the communities, it's very important because the speed of the change is so fast now that we need techniques to get everybody engaged. And transdisciplinary approaches are important for making this more for the communities to appropriate on the results.
So the human communities that are in the Americas are experiencing change very quickly, and we need to have approaches that can quickly bring these perspectives and complexity to the communities and translate.
Because all the stakeholders must play a role in the solutions, or they are involved in the solutions, or maybe they can stop the solutions in such a way.
All right, so when we have problems, we have people who are affected by the problems, people who care about the problems, people who will help us to solve them, stakeholders, and they need to be part of the discussion to kind of help us create good solutions, but also to carry it out effectively, so involving them.
And also because ownership, like everybody assuming ownership will lead to effective solutions. If you
Right.
don't have ownership.
So we need ownership from all the people that are important for trying to solve things. Anybody want to add?
Ya creo que factura un poco más de lo que se dijo, pero estos desafíos y problemas globales que están tan claros y hoy sobre la mesa, ya estamos en la hora de la implementación, ya del diálogo y de seguir hablando, y hay que implementar soluciones, y la implementación de esas soluciones no va a suceder si los que la tienen que llevar adelante no están involucrados en la definición del problema y en la búsqueda de soluciones y en estos trabajos transdisciplinarios. Entonces, para asegurarnos pasar a la acción de una vez por todas, necesitamos a todos los actores en la misma mesa pensando más o menos en un objetivo común.
So yeah, if we don't involve the actors who are going to make the change in the process, it's not going to happen. So in order to have to change to happen, we need to involve everybody.
So for implementation of our solutions, would they need to be involved in the creation of solutions? Alex?
Intellectual curiosity. I
Mhm.
think academic stylization presents really limited way of looking at the world. So it seems like a good way to, and we can all be generalists and understand the world in a much more complex, exciting way.
So one of the things that many of us who do this work all the time find is that it's really fun. Like, a lot of us do what we do because we like to learn, is one of the things. And so it's really enjoyable to learn what agronomists do and how they think, or conservation biologists, or someone from industry, what their goals are. So there's intellectual curiosity that can be satisfied. I think, do we have a hand up? Go ahead, and then go ahead.
Sí, dicho de una manera, la cadena de valor que genera soluciones, los problemas de sostenibilidad, pues hay muchos vacíos, hay muchos huecos en los que estamos. O sea, tiene sentido porque acá reflexionamos sobre cómo completar esa cadena de valor, cómo incluir a los actores que deberían estar. Y eso es lo que tiene sentido al mirar, pues, tener una visión un poco más amplia de los stakeholders, de las partes que deberían estar.
So in other words, there's the value chain, there's many holes, and so we need to fill those gaps between all the different actors
In the what change?
in the value chain.
Value change. So there's many holes in the value change as we try to move toward changing so that we can solve problems. We have gaps. We need the missing values. All right, I'm going to go with you and then over to you.
¿Quién la está utilizando y quién no está formando parte de ese proceso? Y en el caso fundamentalmente de un grupo de países en América Latina, usted cuando revisa los datos estadísticos, yo comenzaba ahorita con la colega mía, usted se da cuenta de que los porcientos que se dedica al PIB son muy pequeños a la ciencia. Entonces tenemos que comenzar, como decía Correa en una entrevista que yo escuchaba, que tenemos que aprender a desaprender y a comenzar a hacer las cosas diferentes para generar espacios más participativos, más inclusivos, como se decía por aquí, y que realmente esa ciencia se convierta en algo popular y que aquí a la vez tengamos menos problemas y que nuestros países sean más ricos en lo económico y con un respeto ambiental también.
So we have to ask ourselves, what science we're doing, for whom we're doing this science, who's involved in the person who's left out in that process. If we look at the investment in the GDP of the countries of Latin American countries, there's very little investment in research, and so we really need more research to be the research we do. We need to make sure it's inclusive and brings everybody, and especially I think the people who's left out usually. And there was something else at the end about investment. Oh yeah, that we have to learn to unlearn, because the way we do science, we have to learn to unlearn the way we do science and do it in a different way.
All right, so as we do science around global change problems, we have to be asking ourselves, for whom are we doing the science? How do we involve them in the science? And one of the issues is, particularly with this context, we're working across more than 15 countries across the Americas. Many of those countries do not have a lot of money for research funding, so it becomes even more important to have the people who are affected by global change problems become part of the research process. And then, what was the last? And then especially for, probably we all need to unlearn so we can learn new ways of working together, maybe even especially for scientists, as we spend a lot of time learning and getting very deep in our fields, a lot of unlearning.
I think having diverse actors or stakeholders coming together, collaborating, it ensures sustainability of the solution. You know, it doesn't just end at the project, it continues.
Right.
Sometimes that's the problem when you have projects, you do the project and then that's it, you know, everything is done, it's forgettable. But when you have diverse actors, they have a vested interest in sustaining the solution.
All right, so having transdisciplinary work together helps us be sustainable, helps us move towards sustainability in two ways. In the sustainability way that we assume, thinking about environmental, social, economic sustainability, but also sustainability in terms of, in the long run, if we have solutions that those communities and stakeholders will take on implementation of the solutions when the research group goes away. If they're not part of that discussion, then that may not happen. One last comment, Gary?
In many countries, there are stakeholders who are deeply opposed to solutions, who have political, or economic, or social interest in direct contradiction to sustainability or solutions. Right. How are they incorporated in transdisciplinary research?
Right, so it's a great question. So when we have work that we're doing on global change questions and we have research groups doing them, recognize that there can be different interests, different groups, different individuals who have an interest in opposing, trying to solve a problem or opposing different solutions. Do we incorporate them into the research group? And I think that you kind of raised a question, and if we incorporate them, that may be helpful, but it could also be very hard. They may derail things. But I think also if you have a transdisciplinary group that's pretty inclusive, you have more ability to say, we decided this. There is buy-in from many communities, and even though you don't support this, we're still going to go forward. So I think it kind of works both ways, okay? All right, I'm gonna stop there. So you raised a lot of great points and hit a lot of the themes that I wanted to touch on. When we talk about these different issues, we're looking, all of us are looking at some dimension of global change problems. We bring with these ID and TD teams broader expertise that help us to study and understand complex environmental problems. Alex raised the point that learning about other fields is satisfying and fun. One thing that nobody said was that funders, science agencies who are going to provide money for research, now they start to require transdisciplinary research groups. IAI requires transdisciplinary research groups. In the United States, National Science Foundation sometimes requires transdisciplinary research groups. But this is very hard, right? Very hard stuff. That's why we're all together spending a week learning how to do this well. Managing interdisciplinary science teams is hard. Managing transdisciplinary research teams is even harder. How do you think that these processes are difficult? what makes it? Why are they hard? And I'm going to especially ask those of you who haven't spoken yet. And so maybe you wanted to come in a moment ago. Do you want to answer that partly? Because I didn't call on you.
Yeah, what I was thinking is that the good thing about working with different people from different sectors is that we get to speak in the same language. For example, if you are economist, you think about money. If you are natural resources specialist, you're thinking about plants and flowers, and so we can all come together to speak one language. We're talking about sustainability, so everybody thinks, partially in their own language, but everybody's going towards the same goal.
Very good. So you get us into the next part that we'll be talking about in a moment. So everybody in different sciences, in different organizations, industry, NGOs, government, we have different language. So if you start to work together in a group, you can develop a shared understanding of each other's language and a shared language. So very good. Go ahead.
So yeah, just going in the way that Iris was saying, the process is difficult because everybody speaks different languages, and because they speak different languages, the technical specifications of each of them, it's sometimes harder for the other disciplines to understand. So that's one of the biggest things that makes it difficult, the language barrier.
Absolutely. So we're deeply trained in our different fields. So we don't necessarily have that ability to communicate with each other effectively. Yes.
Sí, yo creo que además de la diferencia en los lenguajes, los problemas de la realidad que incluyen aspectos sociales, económicos y ambientales no encajan exclusivamente en los marcos conceptuales y en los lenguajes de las ciencias sociales y las ciencias duras, por lo que requieren un abordaje de tipo integral y complejo, en donde intervienen diferentes actores del campo político, del campo académico y también del campo social.
So the complex problems we have, they usually don't fit in the categories of the different disciplines, so that's why we need the interdisciplinary.
Right. So we have these complex global change problems, and we don't have a kind of simple water problem, just hydrology, or a simple industry problem that's just an industrial problem. We have problems that have social and natural and engineering dimensions, that have policy dimensions, that have places where non-governmental organizations are important. They cross over. They don't fit neatly in one of those. And that makes it hard for a lot of reasons, but including the fact that the reward systems for organizations may not work well with that. We'll come back to that in a moment. All right? One, go.
Also, it is difficult because each group has their own interests and their own time frame. For instance, for researchers, our main result is a paper that has to be published soon. For policymakers, maybe
right.
They don't have this commitment to publish, so
right.
we cannot agree in a result that can impact others.
Right. Very good point. That takes us, we'll take another idea over here, but we'll start to take us to thinking about the differences. How do all of us think? What are our goals? We have different interests, different goals depending on the organization we work in. Starting to realize that, learn that, and then work to come to shared goals. There's one more, I'm going to, you're good?
I was going to say something similar to her about the timing of the different participators. So
right.
Sometimes you have to go with 5 years timing
right.
of the project itself and 2 years long, so you have to manage different timings.
So different timelines. Policymakers may be in an agency for 4 years, or an elected official maybe 2 years. Scientists have other timelines, right? So different timelines makes it very hard to come together and get things done in a way that works for everybody, right? And so we get to where we can have different issues, different problems with working together. Poor integration. Some of the challenges between the scientists and the non-scientists. Poor integration across disciplines and research questions. Poor integration again across products and outcomes. Poor balance between practice, the people who are in communities trying to solve problems on the ground, management, government agencies that are trying to manage problems, manage natural resources, policymakers, and science goals. So let's take a few minutes and talk across these. What I created was some tables. And so I guess what is a little hard, I hope you can see this a little bit, it's not showing up very well. Up here, the top, industry, NGOs, government, and scientists. It showed up better on my computer, sorry. And then values, right? So I've got some tables with these things so we can begin to learn our differences. I have some ideas about what those differences are, but we need some of your help. So for industry, I invented some answers, maybe not very good answers. So values for me are simply things people care about. What's important to you? What do you care about? So industry, I think, is maybe product creation, creating products, getting them out into the market, making a profit, being competitive. I think those are things that people care about in industry. Non-governmental organizations, I think, care about solving problems, generating grant funding, getting the money to solve those problems, making sure that you have an impact and measuring it. Government, I think, is like solving problems also, having happy constituencies, voters, happy bosses, being able to protect your budget as a government employee and your agency. Scientists, this is the one I know the most about. We care about research productivity, publications, peer-reviewed articles, research funding, training graduate students really well, right? And so those are my ideas for what we fit in there. Now Valentine is going to help to have a discussion with you about what's missing. And so you can go ahead and kind of feed, because I'm going to try to go in and enter some things. We'll see how well that works.
So what are other values that might be missing there from industry? Yeah.
En la industria, por supuesto, sin solucionar problemas no se pueden crear productos exitosos. O sea, la industria busca solucionar problemas. Entonces, solucionar problemas debería
So problem solving should also be part of
industry
values, because
okay.
that solving problems make selling products.
Hey, keep it going.
From an NGO perspective, I think my personal experience, I don't know if all NGOs are like that, but from my work, for us it's important to inform policy, to have a greater impact, so to amplify our impact, so inform policy is something that we really interest.
Okay, so I'll just repeat these so they get on the audio. So for industry, problem solving; for NGOs, informing policy making, having a great impact.
We were talking about this a little last night, but I think there are, within the sector of scientists, like huge epistemological differences between the purpose of science and sort of what it means to solve a problem or identify a problem. And yeah, I think those are
Right.
somewhat, I mean, need a lot of sort of discussion. It's not just about sort of learning a discipline or a common language.
Right. Right. So Alex makes a very good point, and we're going to talk a little bit about the transdisciplinary differences and then go into interdisciplinary differences. But he makes the great point that scientists and scholars don't agree on what it is that they care about and how they define scholarship and science and what the goals for scholarship and science are. And Jesse's World Cafe exercise is going to help you to learn some of that about each other.
Also, I think that in some cases, there are a lot of these characteristics that can be shared between each of them. So for example, in the NGOs, some of them might also be very interested in research productivity, or they might be interested in some sort of product creation. And problem solving, like, I academics or the industry could also be interested in that. So
Right.
it's nice to like put them in compartments, but a lot of the time it's also shared.
Right, and so recognizing that this is somewhat artificial, there are different types of all these organizations that have different missions. Some may share missions more than others across these categories, and part of what we're going to be doing is trying to find the differences but also commonalities, because when you find common ground, you can work together better.
I think is one of the common objectives of all of these stakeholders. Getting funds to develop the policies or the projects or the solutions.
Creating balance?
Getting funds.
Funds, okay, so everybody wants money.
In terms of the industry perspective, I think that legal framework stability is almost so important as market stability.
Okay.
This is something, as working for the government, it appears a lot in the discussion with the legal sector. In terms of the government, I think that we should divide the governmental perspective when you think about the government in 4 or 5 years term, and the political perspective in terms of the state, in terms of the implementation of a public policy. Because the voter's perspective is not so important for us that belongs to the staff of the ministry, for example, or the staff of the governmental institutions. So I think that's important to have this perspective, because who is working for as part of the staff of these institutions are not so caring about the voter's perspective. So I think that's important to divide that.
Okay, so we bring in another dimension on the industry that they have to care about policy, regulatory stability, but then also when we talk about government, they're thinking about their timelines and kind of how long do they have to implement, what can they do while they do have control, and maybe, I'm not sure if you were trying to say that the kind of worrying about constituencies maybe comes at certain points sometimes, not all the time when they're coming for election. Somebody who hasn't spoken? Okay, Marga.
I just wanted one thing I'd like to point out. I think the scientists are deeply motivated for societal impact, and their values and motivation for doing science are to have a global impact in the world. However, the academic incentives and the reward system are not aligned, so they really push to produce papers and get grants.
Okay, so we'll wrap this discussion up with that last point. I think that there's some conflict about that, and that's one of the questions Jesse's going to ask you guys to talk about. But going back to what Alex said, I mean, some scientists are very concerned about solving problems. Many scientists are not really in a kind of driving way. I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, but that's kind of the difference. I work with physicists who are not trying to solve problems by studying astronomy, for instance. But some of us are very concerned to solve problems, okay? All right, let's back out and let's see, go into the, I have to go back to presentation mode. One thing, Naomi, we got set up on here, it's not, it's like still not showing the way it should. I'm forgetting, so we'll kind of work on that because it's still just showing like a small part of the screen, okay? But we can't really fix that right now. All right, so then with regard to, let's see, I think I want to go to the next one. So let's see if I can get to it. All right, so let's see, let's talk about goals. Try to kind of speed things up here. So if we look at the goals, my ideas for the goals of different organizations. So one thing to keep in mind is we may have very different goals that we're really paying a lot of attention to. To me, and these go back to the values, right? It all matches up. So for me, in industry, it's a lot about generating profit, maintaining competitiveness. NGOs, I think, solving problems, showing effectiveness, protecting the recipients, the things that you're trying to fix and protect. For government, trying to solve problems, manage your resources well. For scientists, we're very driven to publish highly cited research, train productive graduate students who are going to publish highly cited research. and fund and solve problems. So we do come to the idea of solving problems. So I know that this has a lot of overlap with values, but let's kind of get in here what some of the things are that are missing.
So in terms of government, I think one of the goals would be strengthening institutional capacity, because that's overall what the government wants to do with the people that work in the government. It's create capacity, it's actually close those gaps between the science and policy. So that's going to be one of the goals.
Institutional capacity, build that in government to solve problems. Yes. And it gets back to the kind of sustainability that you raised, like to continue to have that capacity into the future.
From the business perspective, first of all, I would propose to talk about business, not just industry.
And for me, business is very broad. It includes companies, corporations, associations, business associations. It can be service, so like all kinds of market, corporate.
I would say just an important goal for any business or industry is sustainability. So to be there for the coming years, sustainability in terms of sustainable business. And I would say that in the long term, it's a very most common issue in the business strategies than in many government strategies, because this is not just for the coming 4 years, for an elected period, but this is going to be here for decades.
In scientists, I think one of the goals should be able to communicate all the research, all these publications, and to translate it into most common language for policy decision makers or the local communities. Not
Okay.
only stay with the publishing, like read publishing, but translate this and be able to communicate.
Okay, but let me ask you, because we're trying to lay out what are their goals now. Do you think that's currently a goal for scientists?
Well, right now, the academia where I am, yes, it's one.
Okay, okay. I think that scientists, we don't, most of us don't think about that a lot. I don't think that's usually an important goal, okay? I think somebody wanted to jump in and add something, and then I'm going to go to Caitlin. Did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, it's just because I was thinking about communication as a very important thing. Even, I don't know if we should put just like a base for all the columns we are talking about, because if we don't communicate about the researches we are doing, or if the industry doesn't communicate what they need, and
right.
So we cannot develop all the things we are discussing here.
So I think what you were suggesting is that we can talk about differences, but maybe we also need to talk about the common things that we all need to be doing. I'm going to come over to Caitlin. Go ahead.
Thanks.
One last thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say from a nonprofit NGO perspective as well, I think sustainability is a major goal as well. I know for our organization, we don't like being tied to the government funding. We just either never knowing if we'll have money moving like beyond a year or two. So I would say sustainability as well, and being more fiscally independent.
Okay. So for NGOs, also having that sustainability, being fiscally independent, so you're not always worried about the next grant to keep going, so that long-term capacity. Okay, we'll take 2 more thoughts, one from you, and then I think you haven't spoken either. Go ahead, Jorge.
La conversación me parece muy interesante,
Mm-hmm.
pero tengo una duda de en qué medio estamos haciendo la discusión, si estamos hablando de un tema normativo o positivo. Es decir,
Right.
Si es lo que debiera ser o estamos hablando de lo que es. Es la primera
Right.
cuestión.
Right.
Y la segunda tiene que ver con la falta de la columna de la comunidad, porque uno de los problemas que en América Latina existe y subsiste durante los años es que las comunidades son observadas como objeto de intervención o como sujeto. Por lo tanto, creo que sería interesante poder también compartir qué objetivos podrían tener las comunidades ante estas 4 columnas que se señalan.
Okay, so if I understood, you said kind of raise a question first. Are we talking kind of, if I understand right, like of what is versus what should be? And so I was talking about what is, but a lot of people kind of come in with what should be, right? And then I think the second thing you were raising is the lack of community members maybe here and kind of in processes, and so you don't get their point of view as part of the discussion. And
that there should be another
the column, yeah. Excellent point. And I think that at a certain point I'm looking for Marcella. I don't know where she is. Okay, she abandoned us. So it's just you and me now. So I think at a certain point we thought, this is so challenging with scientists and industry, with NGOs and government. We can't bring in community members, but it's a very good point and is really a big gap. Absolutely, I agree with you. Okay, one last thought?
Even I came from the business perspective. I think that from government perspective, a goal must be to foster sustainable business models.
Okay.
Because without, to achieve sustainable development, you need to foster sustainable business models.
Did you say sustainable business model?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I think all of us can see, I have to wrap up so we can keep going. Sorry, I know you have a lot of more really great thoughts. So I love how many ideas you have, and I love how eager you are to get in the discussion. It's really good. It's going to be a really good week. You're very smart and have a lot of very valuable expertise on all sides. So what I want to do is kind of just kind of go to say that you've raised a lot of great points. We start to begin to see the differences, and I love that so many of you want to talk about commonalities, but I think you really need to understand more deeply the differences, because I know as scientists, we come with very different points of view. People from the commercial market sector come with different points of view that I don't understand well. People in NGOs have points of view that I don't understand well. People in government, I understand a little better because it's kind of what I do. But I think we have to really learn to understand each other's differences deeply, because then we can start to come together and have a common language, as some of you talked about, some common goals, some common values, and start to work beyond those differences. And so I think we're going to stop for a moment, and we're going to move into talking for a while more about interdisciplinary work and how we overcome some of the barriers. But we're going to cue up a video that Ben shot of our very interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary international team. One, so you can see our team talking about working together as interdisciplinary group, but also that you can have a sense of what we're going to get at the end of this seminar with a video about our work together. So take a moment, get that set up, and then we'll show it to you. So, okay. And the language being from the video or just in general, like a cluster versus a network? Is that what you're asking? A research cluster versus a network? I think that those things are used different ways. And so research networks are often kind of maybe very international, very big, whereas a research group or research team may be smaller and very focused on conducting this project. But a network may come together sometimes to learn from each other and then go away and do different research projects. Is that good? Okay. All right, so I just want to talk for about 10 minutes about some of the ways to overcome these challenges, especially interdisciplinary differences. So really focusing a lot here on different kinds of scientists, but the transdisciplinary is a piece of it too. So we've established it's hard. What do we do about that? So we'll spend about 10 minutes about that, and then Jesse's going to have you do an exercise to talk about some of our different points of view and how we think about these things. So as social scientists studying people and groups, I think of a research team as a small group. And you've already talked about that a group working together has to have a shared language. You have to have shared concepts, understandings, shared values, shared goals we talked about. And so we've talked about the differences in some of these values and goals across different types of organizations. We also have differences in types and goals and values in different sciences, and Alex talked a little bit about that. Shared norms for how we interact. So as scientists, social scientists have different rules about publishing together than natural scientists sometimes. There can be a lot of conflict about that. Who gets to be an author on a paper? What order are they going to be in? For instance, in many natural science fields, the last author is the most important author. In social science fields, in general, the first author is the most important author. So there can be different norms, different rules about these things. When does someone get to be a co-author? We may have different identities. So we have a strong identity as a scientist with our field. Now we're asking people to move away from that strong identity and develop a sense of themselves as part of this more complicated interdisciplinary group or transdisciplinary group. So the more differences there are in a small group, the harder it is to work together. And we need to move toward having shared language, shared values, shared goals, shared norms or rules and roles. So how do we do that as we come together as different kinds of scientists? How do we move in that direction to where we're sharing these things, right? How do we move beyond the goals and languages of social scientists, natural scientists? What are some of the best practices when we get to be transdisciplinary groups? Again, I think in terms of the differences that we all have that we've been talking about. So best practices to overcome some of these things. First thing I think is to recognize, to know, it's hard. It's not going to be easy. You've got to spend time developing your ability to work together. You've got to work together to overcome some of the challenges and some of the frustrations. Necesitamos tener mucha paciencia, ¿sí? Lots of patience. You have to have strategies to overcome these challenges of having differences. So the first thing that I think is important is to invest the time in the development of people who can help to lead these efforts to help the team work together. So someone who has some experience and is learning how to have good strategies to work together. You have to choose your team members carefully. So on an interdisciplinary scientific team, it's important to have people with different disciplinary expertise. That's important. You've all talked about the reasons why, but you also need people with good social skills. Right? I think it's 50-50. Not every person in the world should work on an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary team. A lot of people will be very uncomfortable, so they don't need to be on that team. They can work on their field and be very good at it. But people with that expertise, but also the ability to work well with others. You should have, I think, a core of people who have experience working in that environment. So let's say you're creating a team of 10 people, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Of those 10 people, 2 or 3 of them should have experience working in an interdisciplinary team or transdisciplinary team. It shouldn't all be everybody is new. I think another strategy is to begin to bring in people who already have some relationship with each other. So maybe 2 or 3 of those people have been working together. So Valentin and I and Jesse and Tati just submitted a new proposal to the National Science Foundation to look at biodiversity across the Americas. We've been working together for 4 or 5 years, and we're bringing in new people to that group. So it helps that we know each other, we know each other's jokes, we can tease each other, we are friends, we can interact, and then we can also bring new people in. I think that's very helpful to have that core of people who already work together, and then add new people. You need to start working together and meeting together early. And so in the beginning of my career, like many social scientists, many of you may be in the room, 22 years ago when I started as a professor, I would have engineers come to me and say, I have a proposal due next week. I need a social scientist to be on it because the funder said I need a social scientist. It's due in 7 days. Could you be on the proposal? And I might have said yes the first time, and then after that I said no. Right? If we're going to have a good, successful, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary proposal, we need to start to meet together 6 months before the deadline. And I think it takes twice as long and when you have an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary group as when you have just one discipline or you just have just scientists. 2 times as long to develop a good research group, a good research proposal, a good research project. So leave a lot of time. I think you have to be very clear about responsibilities, all right? So on the proposal that we just submitted, so Valentin, maybe I didn't tell him, but he's got his job is to be the chief of the agricultural component. And Jesse's job is to be the chief of the ecological component. And Tati and Rodrigo are running the Brazil component and the relationship with Conservation International. We all know, and it says in the proposal, who does what, right? Of course, I'm the jefa, but, but we all have different roles and we need to involve everybody and define them. And know that in different organizations and different sciences, the ideas and expectations may be very different. You need to leave time to learn about those different views. So the exercise Jesse's going to take you through is designed to do that. I've already talked about the clear norms, roles, expectations. Spell things out. It can be really, one of the reasons why the II is funding capacity building workshops like this is they have been very frustrated, especially Holm Thiessen, the director. They would call for proposals that were interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary, and they get proposals that are not at all. Proposals run by a natural scientist who isn't giving any money to the social scientists. Proposals where they needed community members or NGOs to be involved, and they're not there. So they're trying to ensure that you have more leadership skills to create these kinds of transdisciplinary groups, can work together with maybe, hopefully over the long run, some of the people in this room, but also with people in your country, with your own networks, and have those leadership skills to do that. So we're investing in your leadership skills. Developing a shared purpose. You're going to create your work groups to do your proposals together. And you'll say, our topic is this, it's X. And you'll work together for 2 or 3 days and realize, well, I think it's X, but really the other person thinks it's Y, and this person thinks it's A, and this person thinks it's B. So you may say in the beginning, this is our shared goal together, but over time you realize we still have very different goals. And so kind of keep coming back together and saying, what are our goals? It's important to not have tokens, right? So if you've got 50 physicists or 50 people from industry and 1 scientist or 1 social scientist, that's a token person. If you think that social science or NGO or government is an important component of your research, then we should have more than 1 of those people probably, right? All right, that's where I'm going to end. You get to look at my puppy, right? And I think maybe we take 1 or 2 quick questions and then go to the World Cafe. Quick questions? Ready to just go to work yourselves? Yeah.